Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Randi, Goldstein, Casey. Welcome to Savvy Broadcasting, Life Unscripted. I am so grateful to have you here this wonderful evening. We're going to talk about a subject that no one wants to broach other than what money is in your bank account, and that is the taboo of death and planning for the death of your loved one. And how do we go about easing that very uncomfortable subject? Because it's not only something that's going to happen to us, but it happens to the ones we love the most. And often we're not prepared for it when it comes about. So welcome to Savvy.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah. So tell
the
me.
Subject is tough.
Let's talk about this fun subject. But you own and operate a funeral service. There's 5 generations of Goldstein. I'm not going to say the whole name because I'll totally screw it up. But share a little bit.
Goldsteins is fine. Yep.
Yeah. Share a little bit about your business, how you came to doing what you're doing and getting into the whole funeral industry.
Well, in all honesty, I was literally born into it. My grandfather and my great uncle, who are brothers, were the original owners. So it just kind of went down to my dad and my uncle, cousins on my other side. And now there's 8 of us running it now. And we are 3rd, 4th, and 5th generation coming in.
That's awesome. Now, I know for me, my dad owned a pastry shop and we were not wanting to, other than eat it, we didn't want to be part of the making of it. Was there any like, I don't want to do this? Or you kind of always like, hey, yeah, I could totally fall into this?
No, when I graduated high school, going to college, I lived at home. I didn't go away to school and I needed a job. So I started working as an admin for the funeral home. I never thought I would come in and be a funeral director. And then the longer I worked there, I liked what they did. I liked being able to help people and to guide them. And I just decided to go for it. After I graduated with a bachelor's degree, I went on to mortuary school and got licensed.
Awesome. So, now, I know nothing about the industry. What does a funeral director do? I can imagine it's very service oriented, but what does it look like?
Well, it varies from state to state. So I'll just base it on my state. So in Pennsylvania, in order to be a funeral director, you have to be licensed by national. You have to pass a national exam and a state exam, and we have to keep our credits up every 2 years, all that stuff. We are able to meet with families, plan ahead for funerals, plan at need funerals when someone has already died. We also can go into the prep room and do work down there with the bodies. I'll just leave it at that.
That's fine.
So that's where the licensure comes in. But like, you can't discuss like finances, like cost or anything like that with a family unless you're a licensed funeral director in the state of Pennsylvania.
Wow, I didn't know that. Well, it is important because, as I said, just before we hit the go button, my mom died. I was not there as they were arranging the funeral. It was my sister who is in charge and getting probate and all that stuff. And she was part of the last will. But it was a big, like, she was overwhelmed. I could see she was like shocked. She had no idea about any of this stuff. What do I do? How do I go about this? And the process was really, really hard, but the people at the funeral home were very gracious in helping her, as she told me afterward, with going through the process. But what should people know? Because we don't want to discuss it, but I think it's something that we should discuss before we get there with our loved ones while they're alive. What is some of your take on that or advice for people?
Well, the way to look at what we call prearranging a funeral, which is doing it prior to someone passes, is that it honestly is a gift to your survivors. And there's different ways of having it done. Some people come in like, 50 years old and up and plan for themselves. They just want to get it done and know that their kids don't have to worry about it. Other people don't have anyone, so they get it done and make sure, like, executors appointed to handle everything, or, POA, power of attorney. And then you have people that are moving their aging parents or loved ones into a facility, and they need to take care of the arrangements, because a lot of the nursing homes and assisted livings want to know that things are taken care of, especially when you're doing what's called the spend down theory for Medicaid, where you have to spend down and make sure they want to know the funeral's planned for. So
Wow, I never thought about that. But that is a big issue. And one that my mom said to me prior to her passing, she said, "Oh, I want to leave you all something when I go." I'm like, "Don't worry about leaving us anything. If you could pay for the funeral, that would be awesome." Because
Right.
I meant that very practically, because I know the biggest stress is your loved one's passed on, you're sad and you're grieving, but now you're like, how do I pay for the cost of this funeral, which aren't usually that cheap.
No, an average funeral is between like $8,000 and $12,000. And what people don't understand is that doesn't include your clergy and it does not include your cemetery costs.
Mm,
They're total separate entities most of the time, a lot of the time, so I shouldn't say most of the time. Cemetery property is expensive, but once you buy the property, there's other fees that people don't even realize. Like you
mm.
have to pay to open and close the grave. You have to
Wow.
pay sometimes for a liner or a vault to go into the grave prior to the casket. You have to pay for a either headstone or foot marker or whatever the cemetery requires to mark the grave. They're all additional expenses.
Yeah.
So, when people start the process, they really don't realize how involved it is.
Yeah.
So it's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I would probably suggest every alive person, whether you think you're going to die tomorrow or not, maybe just start thinking about setting it up for yourself. I know personally, I used to joke with my mom, you could dump me in the East River. That way, it won't cost anything. She's like, yeah. And then a police car will roll up right behind that and I'll be arrested for,
Right.
murder.
Then you
She's
have a
like,
whole nother headache.
no, but I really don't care how I go out, if you want to cremate me or whatever. But let's say a family is running on low cost, and they come in, they're like, whoa, I didn't know, we don't have anything saved. What does that look like? How are you able to help them? Is there, like, what does that look like?
Um, there's a couple different ways. In our area, there's organizations that will help if they're really indigent and need stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, you'd have to prove it. So
Yeah.
one of the issues is just because the person who died didn't have anything doesn't mean the family doesn't.
Hmm.
There's that issue.
Yeah.
There's ways to cut back, like don't put newspaper notices in, do it on our website for free.
Mm.
Don't use don't have limousines, drive yourselves to the
Mm.
funeral. You pick a lesser expensive casket,
Yeah.
do it graveside rather than at the funeral home or at
Mm.
another place and then go to the cemetery. There's a lot of options. We
Yeah.
work with families all the time. And if there's really money problems, like I said, there's organizations in the Philadelphia area that will help you and we'll put you in touch with them.
Awesome. Now, is cremating probably the most inexpensive way?
Yes, but like because we're primarily a Jewish funeral home, we help everyone, we deal with everyone. We don't have a high rate of cremation. We do it. We absolutely handle it. It's becoming more and more popular. It's
Mhm.
becoming popular for a couple of reasons. One, people don't live in the same area anymore. Like all the family doesn't live in one spot. Like
Mm.
I'm a very odd family that we are all pretty local.
Mm.
But most people are transient, and thanks to cell phones and Zoom and everything else, you don't need to be next door to your family. You
Yeah.
can contact them anytime you want. Um, Cost is a factor, but there's options with cremation that people don't realize. You can still have a service. You can even
Yeah.
have the body present if you want.
Aw.
There's a lot of different options. So, a lot of what we do is educating people.
Yeah. That I'm so happy you do that. And I think that's what people don't realize. They wait until the moment it happens and they're like, what do we do? And then they have wonderful people like you and the people at your funeral home that help them plan that. Now, I'm also wondering, how do you broach it? Because my husband's parents, we've tried to, they're older, much older, like 80s, near 90. And we're like, let's have that chat about when you're not here. What would you like? And they're like, nah, let's not go there. We don't want to talk about that will or burial or whatever. What's your suggestion to people about even broaching the topic with your loved ones?
One of the questions you can ask them is, which doesn't mean to make the arrangements, but just out of curiosity, do you own graves? Do you have burial
Mm.
plots somewhere?
Yeah.
And if they say no, then you can say, well, have you thought about it? Where do you want to be buried? Then at
Mhm.
least you can get a gauge. Are they thinking burial or are they thinking cremation? At least you
Mm.
can have an idea. And then if they'll take the ball rolling from that, then you can say, if we do this ahead of time, you get to choose what you want. We're not picking for you. We'll know your wishes.
Exactly.
If they're really against it, there's pretty much nothing you can do unless you have to put them into some type of facility, then you're going to have to do it. But that said, you need all their information, not limiting, like you need their social security number. You need copies of discharge papers if they're veterans. You need to know their parents' names, including the mother's maiden name. This is all stuff that they ask for on a death certificate. Some of it can be put down as unknown, but if they're living, you might want to start getting a history. You can also just ask the questions out of curiosity. Not so much the social security number, but the rest.
They'll be like, I don't know about that. Yeah, but I like you say that instead of making, let's talk about death today. Like, no.
And there's other things too. Like, you need to know what they have. In other words, not money amounts, but do they have all their bank accounts in one bank? Is there life insurance? Do they own multiple properties? Are both their names on wherever they're living? Lease agreement, deed, whatever. Do they still own automobiles? Because you need a death certificate for everything in order to take it out of their name. So
it's a difficult process, and you might even have to finish doing their taxes or something.
Right. And honestly, if that's another place, like the tax form would always have we always tell people, look to see in their last tax return. That's where the social security number always is. You never have to worry about that. But but those are things like, people don't think about and you need. There's other things too, like clothing. What do they want to be dressed in?
Very good question.
I'm not super young, but my kids know what I want to be dressed in. And I told them I'll come back and haunt them if they don't do it right. So.
You sound like my grandma. My grandma was like, I will haunt you. You need to take them after the wake for a wonderful meal down at the Irish pub. I'm like we care about eating and drinking after this. It's like, you better do it or I'm going to haunt you. And she
being Jewish, you better have a good meal afterwards. So, all about the food, but it's hard. It's, it's not an easy subject to broach with aging parents. Another way to bring it up is if you and your husband were to do it, let's say, and say, hey, guess what we did? And that might intrigue them, or they'll just think you're totally insane and still not want to do it. Like there's just some people out there that will never go for it. Because a lot of people feel like if you plan a funeral, then you're jinxing it. And you're like, which is really not true, as we all know, but people are very superstitious. So they don't like to talk about something that's so awful because then it could happen.
Yeah. And the very idea, it's so final because, we all haven't died yet. So it's scary, the idea for a lot of people, what's on the other side. I believe in God, so I'm not as scared, but some people will be like, I don't know what comes after. I think the lights go out and I'm just gone. And so it's a scary thought then to be broaching, I won't be here one day. And to talk about it.
It's also scary because you're kind of in the situation I'm in. My parents are still living. My kids are adults. They're, not in their 30s yet, but they're in their mid to late 20s. And they're, moving on in their lives. And it kind of puts the realization that, wow, we're middle-aged, we're there, we got to think about stuff. And it's a scary thought because, you lost your mom and I'm very sorry to hear that. But like your husband still has his parents and, how much longer are we going to have them? That's a scary thought too. Like, you just never know when it's going to happen.
You don't. And, honestly, even for yourself, my friend went to Italy with her friends and there was a gal with her in her 30s, mid 30s, and she died on their trip, just had a heart attack. Didn't expect it. And so you never know when your last card's up either. But we had a guest a long time ago, we even had an app. People would have to go look for it, but the app was really cool in that you could enter all the information in it and it would prompt you like TurboTax. What is your social security or where do you want to be buried? And so you would plug it all in there and then it would set up like a templated will for you. It's kind of a first start and then you could bring it to an attorney to get whatever. So I thought that was a cool idea. So that way you're not going, what do I need to know to get this rolling and get the ball rolling?
And if you do eventually make your own prearrangements, you got to make sure family members knows that you did it.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Exactly.
aware that they just have to make one phone call when the death occurs.
Yeah.
So, that's an important thing too. But it's funny. It's 2023 and it's still such a taboo subject.
Yeah, I think money's right behind it, but it's probably in front of money and then money right behind it. But another thing to think about, my friend said there was this tradition, I forget what country, where you would go ahead of time and see what, if I were going to die today, what am I leaving my family with? And you kind of just go through your belongings every year or so and say, if I were to die today, what do they have to contend with? And you look at your stuff that way so that you realize I don't need this, or I don't need that. So you get rid of it because you're looking at it through the eyes of, oh my gosh, I got to handle all this. And so you begin to kind of dissipate and get rid of the things you don't need ahead of time before you die. Yeah, interesting idea. But we could go on longer, but I don't want anyone to leave without finding out how they can find out more about you. I know you have a couple locations. If they happen to be in one of your locations or want to find out more about you, how can they do that?
You can always reach us on our website. It's Goldsteins with an S funeral.com. And we have, you can email us through our info@goldsteinsfuneral.com. Our locations are in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The other one is in Southampton, Pennsylvania, which is out in Bucks County, right outside the city. And we do have a third location called Roth Goldsteins down in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And awesome. You can always reach us via the phone. We always answer our phones. It's 215-927-5800.
All right. Well, anyone listening in, if you happen to be going through or, you want to take this down in the near future, if you think you might be needing their services, goldsteinsfuneral.com. And just think about what we've talked about today. It could help you in the near future. Should you or your loved ones be going through this not fun subject, but we all have to deal with it. I have to thank you again so much for coming, Randi, and sharing your great wisdom today on Savvy Broadcasting.
Well, thank you for having me. It was fun.
Thank you.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.